What is happening? Welcome to my channel. My name is Matt Bradford. Today we're going to be talking about making a lap steel template. The original template I made, the first one I ever made for myself, is here. We're going to work our way to the new shape and everything. First things first, real quick, I have a Patreon today. Obviously we're building, so nothing on Patreon, but if you want lap steel lessons, all the materials are available on Patreon. I have merch for sale. It uses these two logos. The link for that is below. If you want to buy an instrument, right? I build instruments. I built this one. This one's for sale. This one's for sale. And just email me, mattbradfordmusic@gmail.com, or some of the stuff's on Reverb, but it's hard to calculate shipping and all that stuff. So, yeah. Yeah, email me. I also make conversion necks for Telecasters. If you got your own Tele or your Strat or whatever, I make conversion necks for those. Finally, wait, merch, blah, blah. Yeah, if you just want to leave me a tip, you're like, man, this was super awesome. I don't want to subscribe to anything. I don't want to buy your stupid t-shirt. I definitely don't want to buy your stupid guitar. You just want to leave me a tip. Boom. QR codes. Leave me a tip. It's really greatly appreciated, and the people who've done it, man, I really appreciate. You've been so generous, and it's helping me do this. So, thank you. Okay. This is, where do I start? This is the first template I ever made. And I made it on a piece of butcher paper, and then I spray adhesived it onto a piece of MDF. And it was definitely a learning process, right? I've worked in repair shops for a long time. I have worked with builders, but I never had to really make my own routing template. So, it was a learning process, but I know the basics of building an instrument, right? The basics of building an instrument are you want a center line. That's super important. Everything wants to be on center, and then you want a scale length, right? So you want where your nut goes, and you want where your intonation point is. When you have those two things, those three things, center line, nut, intonation, everything else can kind of go wherever it goes. The one consideration is with the headstock, making sure that your strings don't pull out and run into other tuning machines. That's a mistake. But this template was super cool, and it became my first ever lap steel, right? Which is also, I mean, what a cool instrument, and I'm stoked to have it, and it's served me well, and it sounds great. However, you can see that it has evolved over time into this one. There were things like the way the fingerboard ends, where I wanted it to have this little scoop. There were things like where the controls were, where I wanted to move the switch in just a little bit. I do like where the knobs are, etc. I like having the top-mounted pickguard. I didn't like having the switch away from the pickguard. All of these little things are things that I have learned as I've spent time building these. So, I wanted to build a new template for two reasons. Number one, I do want to make this a little bit wider. When you look at a Telecaster, which I've been playing a lot of, it's a wider body, right? This is a 10-inch body, this is a 13-inch body. And I feel like it's possible that the amount of wood, the mass of wood, might be adding a little bit of body to the tone. I don't know. And so, the plan is to build 3 instruments. I want to make them wider. I'm going to build them out of the same wood that I built this out of. And I'm going to make them wider. I'm going to build one the exact same as I built this one, basically. Right? Same size, same shape, same everything. Then I'm going to expand it to this wider shape that I'm going to come up with in the process of this video. And I'm going to do 2 different construction methods. This construction method is a neck through body. So this is one piece of wood here, and then I have 2 wings on it. And if you've seen building a lap steel video, actually this is the one I build. In that video, start to finish, you see me build this instrument. This body was built using a piece of mahogany that I got from StewMac, and then I built the neck out of maple, and then I built a neck joint here, and so glued the neck on and then put the fingerboard over it. So this is actually a body, a 2-piece body here, and then a neck here. So much more similar to the tellies, which again have been my main sort of instruments that I've been the ones I want to pick up. I don't know words. The point is, okay, so what is really changing the sound the most? Is it the neck through construction? Is it the mass of the wood? Is it having the maple neck and the in this case sugar pine body? I don't know. I'm excited to do 3 different instruments. We're going to be using. I'm doing some pickup tests right now, and I will publish them eventually too. These are. Well, this is a Righteous Sound Volca, and it's been the one that's been grabbing me. I'm struggling with a neck pickup. I mean, the Righteous Sounds always sound great. A lot of neck pickups sound great. I really like a fire. It doesn't matter. We're getting way too in the weeds. We're doing a template today. So the next step is to go into the shop, design the template. So I always start with a full 8x4 sheet of MDF, 1/2 inch. This is my least favorite part of anything, is cutting down sheet goods. My shop is just not made for this, and it's freaking heavy, and I don't like doing this, but it is what it is. It's the cheapest way to do it, and yeah. So I have these templates already previously. I have a telly body that I've been using, and I have my original shape. That's 10 inches. I'm making sure that I know that for the recording. That's 13 inches because, I know how thick a telly is. But I want to use, I want to maximize my yield on the MDF. And so I'm looking at all the different templates I want to try to get out of one sheet. And then I'm cutting down, a piece that's going to work for these templates. Once I'm cut down, I can look and see that, make sure that all my pieces fit. I have offcuts that are going to be usable for pickguards and for other necks and for all types of stuff. See, here's an offcut that'll be useful for all types of templates. Sweet. Also, my actual template still fits on this sheet, and I have a little bit of space on either side. Now, my original design was on butcher paper, and then I spray adhesived it onto a piece of MDF. Because I kind of have an idea what I'm doing, I'm going to go straight to the MDF, and you're going to see in a little bit why that was a mistake. But we're going to start with a center line. The center line is the most important thing. You can see on every single template I make that there's a center line, and that allows me to line everything up. Now, as I design this, I got 2 utensils. I have a marker and I have a pencil. And the things that I know are going to exist in the same exact spot each time are going to go with the marker. I was just measuring how thick the telly body is, making sure that I'm going to have enough space to have half that thickness on one side of the center line. And I'm going to mark my center line in Sharpie, because this is going to be a non-changing portion of the template. Once again, it's the most important part of any template for me. Having a straight center line, and that everything is based off of that as a reference point, no matter what I'm doing, allows me to line up multiple templates. It allows me to transfer stuff. It allows me to know exactly where I'm working off of. Because I have a shape that I like, and I have a headstock that I like, I'm going to start with that neck and headstock shape once again in Sharpie, because I already have it. Again, these are my designs. They started on that piece of butcher paper that you saw. That's a couple years old at this point, but it's still on that template. This headstock design has been transferred to a million other templates, my conversion necks, as well as multiple types of lap steel templates. The one I'm using right now is my baritone template, because I want to make sure I have space to do a baritone as I redesign this new shape, even though this shape is not going to be for a baritone. You can see that I'm leaving enough space where I can really design the body the way I want to. Now, I have sewing rulers, I have humbucker templates, I have all types of things that can give me a perpendicular line to my center line. As I start to lay out things like the nut, as I start to lay out things like the bridge or the intonation point and all these things, I want to make sure that I'm working straight off of the center line, and I'm working perpendicular to the center line. I want all of my measurements to be as exact as I possibly can get them. Now, along with the center line, the other most important thing is scale length, because obviously you want your instrument to play in tune. I
prefer a longer scale length personally. I'm setting this one for 25.5 inches. Traditional lap steels can be anywhere from 26 to 22 inches. A lot of the shorter scale lengths make slants easier, and I've heard people say that they prefer it. I have a harder time staying in tune on shorter scale lengths personally, and one of my favorite lap steels ever was my buddy Marty's 53 Fender Stringmaster, and that has a 26-inch scale, and I remember playing it, and it had super heavy strings, and it just spoke in a way that I felt was truly special. So I want to do something similar to that for myself. So this is a 25.5-inch scale. I would actually prefer to do 26 inches. I have in the past, but because my fretting templates are for 25.5 inches, that's what I'm going to use. As I start to set my body width, I want the width at the intonation point to be the widest part of the body, similar to my Telecaster, also similar to this, my original design. The wider it is there, that's near where my hand rests. And so this starts coming into lap steel design. How am I going to, my considerations for what happens when I'm playing it. So let me just review that you can use, you could use that as a template. You can use, a telly, I have a Strat back there. You can use anything you want as a template. This is my shape that I came up with a couple of years ago, and I really like it. So the next step now is to explode it a little bit. So I'm using this as my basis, but you can just start freehand drawing if you want. You have the two main points, and you could honestly already start laying out where your pickups go or something if you need some sort of reference. I know that I'm going to have enough space here for that, so I'm going to start laying out the body first. Now you could see on my original template that I had laid out where the pickups were, and you may want to make sure that you have enough space for pickup rings. You want to really check and make sure that as you lay out your template, if you're coming up with your own shape, that you have enough space for all of the things you want to put on the instrument. What I'm looking for is two things here. What I'm looking for in my design is I'm trying to add some extra width to the instrument, and I'm also trying to add some extra wood mass to the instrument. I'm not sure that it's going to make a difference, but I want to try and I want to see. And so each of these things, and I left all of this in so you can see how many different ways I tried to design this body as I continue to just struggle with how do I take a body shape that I'm already happy with and make it bigger. And I'm making the curves way too big here, and I'm seeing it over and over and over again. And I'm starting to wish that maybe I had done this on paper where I could just, start from scratch each time. But we're here, we're on the MDF, we're doing it. And I keep erasing, I keep drawing. I took a break, I went back overnight, I came back in the morning when it was cold, started drawing again, and I still couldn't get it where I wanted it. Now, for the purpose of this video, I was hoping to design something totally from scratch with just the idea in my head, but the reality is that it wasn't coming out the way I wanted it, and I do love the way this body shape works. So what I ended up doing was starting with my original template and just moving it to one side and measuring it, moving it to the other side and measuring it, pushing it back and forth, starting to try to expand it, and you can see here I'm hand drawing these curves. I'm changing the way the body looks a little bit, but I am still using my original template to set the initial shape, and you can see all of a sudden I have something that I at least am starting to be happy with. But the curves are still not the same, and I'm pushing the body backward and forward. I'm measuring, I'm trying to make sure that it's totally symmetrical in the places I want it to be symmetrical, and then asymmetrical in the places I don't. You can see that top horn right there is still not great for where the controls are going to go. And that's another consideration, is where your control's going to go. For me, I want to make sure that I can get the volume control slightly in front of the bridge so that it's easy to get my hand there. I'm going to keep adjusting my curves. I'm going to keep adjusting stuff by eye until I have it feeling the way I want. Another consideration, for me at least, is the output jack. I prefer a right angle cable, and depending on my previous instruments, I can't always use a right angle cable. I have a gig later tonight, and I can't use a right angle cable because one of my guitars won't accept it. And that's okay, but if I'm redesigning the instrument, then deciding where the output jack goes and making sure that I have the right space for a right angle cable is great. Now I'm still looking at the curves. I'm still trying to consider what is the best radius for me? How do I make this look right? You can see that we're still just going to keep modifying a little bit at a time, until I end up with an instrument that I'm totally happy with. And I would encourage you to give yourself the space for some trial and error. Give yourself the time and space to really design something that when you look at it, you go, I like that. Whether or not anybody else does. This is not about, I'm designing a guitar that I like, and then hopefully everybody else likes it and wants to buy it. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to build something that everybody else likes first. I'm not going to lie, the amount of footage I have of me designing this guitar, there's hours and hours and hours of it. Once I'm done, once I have my curves kind of where I want them, and this is key, is like I'm pretty close, I transfer it all to marker because I want to be able to see it as I start cutting and as I start sanding. But all of these curves, all of these things, I'm laying out where the end of the fingerboard is, I'm laying out some other stuff just so I can kind of have an idea of what I'm looking at. But at the end of the day, when I start cutting, I'm going to let the sander decide the final curves on some of this stuff. You can see that kind of squared triangular corner right there where the body and the neck are meeting. I'm laying out where the fingerboard goes right now while I'm talking, apparently. But you can see, and then also the back edge of the template. I'm not happy with how fat that looks, but I do know that I'm going to clean this all up with the sander. I will tell you that measuring over and over and over again, rechecking all of your lines over and over again, super important. Ask me how I know. But these are the things. When you get the template right away, it makes the rest of your life easier. So I'm double checking, I'm triple checking, I'm doing stuff in pencil, I'm going to do it again in pen. I'm going to just keep double checking to make sure that everything is laid out the way it's supposed to be. So I start on the table saw because I want to get this cut down to make it as easy to get through my bandsaw as possible. My bandsaw is not a giant bandsaw. I am jealous of large bandsaws. Someday, hopefully, I can have an even larger shop. But for the moment, this is what I'm working with. And so I start on the table saw, I go to the bandsaw, and I just slowly cut the body out. And I want to get close to the edges, but I'm going to finish everything with a sander. So one of the things, with a template, you can fix the edges, but I'd rather not have to glue pieces onto the template if I don't have to. So just cutting it out carefully, close to the edges, knowing that over-sanding is too hard, right? But look at that. That's a pretty good cut. It's not perfect because now we're going to go to the sander. And I'm going to start on my belt sander, and I'm going to start with straight edges. And I'm just going to get my edges straight, and then I'm going to do the back edge of the body because I want to make sure that I get the back edge of the body where I want it. That's the one place I'm not super happy yet. So making sure that those flat edges are nice and flat, and then I start rocking the body on my belt sander. And this is how I'm going to get the final curvature. It's going to be a more organic curvature than I could draw. I'm just trying to get the back end to feel the way I want it to feel. And I'll go from one side, and then I'll switch sides, go to the other side, because that way I have sort of an even left-handed, right-handed sand. And we end up with, let me turn that off so I don't get caught on it. We end up with a decent looking butt end of the instrument. You can see that it's still rough around a lot of the edges here. I want to sand all of this, and I want to get it as clean as possible. So I go over to my oscillating spindle sander and just start sanding and keep sanding. And one of the things that a mistake I made on my original templates was once again having too tight of curves where I really needed to use really small spindles. It was really hard to not have sort of indentations, and doing it all with that big spindle lets me use that big spindle on everything, and it feels better. It's going to be easier for me to sand later on. I really like the way it looks, and I'm really making sure it's smooth all over. I can just run my finger across it, and I'll be able to feel if there's bumps, if there's inconsistencies, I will be able to feel it. I want it to be as finished as possible. One of the biggest bummers, I love StewMac, and I don't want to, talk trash, but I bought this template and you can see how rough it is around the edges. And I reached out to them and I said, hey man, this is a really rough template. And there's like, and they reached back and they said, it's not supposed to be a finished product. You're supposed to sand. And it's like, no kidding. But the smoother my template is, the smoother my final product is going to be, the less sanding I have to do. And if you've watched my video on building a lap steel, you will understand that sanding is my least favorite thing in the world. Now, I'm fortunate enough that I've already cut out this neck shape multiple times, and so I have a neck shape. But if you don't have one, you can always just use a straight edge to get these really straight lines. I like to use a straight edge with a pattern bit. That's how I did my original ones. And it gives me just a nice straight neck. Here I can kind of get to the edge of where I need to sand, but I can see there's a little indentation right on the inside of my neck joint, and that bums me out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with a piece of off-cut MDF. I'm going to glue that in place, and then I'm going to sand it smooth again. So just some real simple super glue in a pipette, some super glue accelerator, get that thing on there, take it back to the spindle sander, get it nice and smooth, finish it off with a block. And I'm going to finish the whole body off with a block. I want to make sure that, again, there's no curves, there's nothing weird, there's nothing bad. I'm going to check every single thing with a block. I'm going to final sand because, again, I want it as smooth as possible. The smoother it is now, the smoother all my cuts are. The smoother my cuts are, the less sanding I have to do. The less sanding I have to do, the happier I am as a person. And then once it's done, I just route out another template from this template. So same basic idea, cut out a rough and then just route it. And that way I have one that doesn't have all the glued stuff on it. It doesn't have all the extra pencil marks and things. I can lay everything out nice and clean. And that's a great place for me to start designing the rest of the instrument. The next step is to create a pickguard template. I like a top-mounted pickguard. That's my favorite way to work on instruments, and so that's the way I'm going to design it. I've also got 2 holes in the body that are where the pickups are going to go. That allows me to locate templates from the body into the piece of wood that I'm going to be using the same each time. I want the pickguard to follow all the curves of the body. Once I have a pickguard design set up, then I can start to think about what's going to go underneath it, the control cavity. Same thing, I can locate the control cavity based off of not only the pickguard, but also those 2 locating screws. So I just screw the body to the pickguard cavity template, and then I trace that. I am realizing at this moment that my roundover is going to end up going under the pickguard. I'm putting the pickguard too close to the edge. So I take one of my necks, these are conversion necks for Telecasters or for Stratocasters, and I measure how deep my roundover is. Then I can start moving my design up to compensate for the mistake I almost made. There is nothing worse than a roundover going under your pickguard. Ask me how I know. I hope that you guys can learn from some of the mistakes I made. I seem to always need to learn the hard way. So once again, I'm laying out space for my screw holes. I want to lay everything out with enough space where I don't have wood cracking off. I'm sure you've had that before in your guitars where a control cavity isn't quite right and the wood breaks into the control cavity. Telecasters, getting those screws right on the very edges of the control cavity is always a pain. And so leaving myself enough space for comfortable screw holes. You can see that this body bolts right onto the pickguard, and so I can use the same exact thing to lay out exactly where the pickguard goes. I have the same shape over and over again. I'm double checking to make sure everything is symmetrical in the places that I want it to be symmetrical. I'm a fan of asymmetry, but sloppiness always looks bad. And again, ask me how I know. Making sure that things are laid out in a line, or if they're not in a line, they are intentionally not in a line and not slightly not in a line, which looks ridiculous. Now, here I'm checking again, and it's trial and error. Where do I want to put my screw holes? Am I going to go offset? Am I not? I'm going to end up with 5 screw holes in this pickguard, which is frankly more than I would like. I would like to have 2. As a semi-retired repair guy, I would like to just have 2, but 5 is fine. I then transfer the screw holes from the pickguard to the control cavity template, because now I can see exactly where the screw holes are going to go. And they're going to go in the same spot every time. And once again, I can start laying out my control cavity. I have the external dimensions that are going to be acceptable because I have my pickguard already laid out. I can use, again, various found items to set radiuses, and I'm already starting to notice that the pickguard, the control cavity I'm designing, is not allowing me to have the volume control as far forward as I would like it. And again, this is why I lay everything out in advance. I check my designs, I check with components, I make sure everything's going to fit. I'm going to make my control cavity slightly wider, but I'm going to, again, create space for the screw holes. There's nothing worse than having the screw hole cracked out in a pickguard. It's just a pain. So I'm laying everything out. Even though you're not going to see the control cavity, I want it to make sense underneath the pickguard. So when you take the pickguard off, you're not like, well, why is it like a circle? I want it to look right. You can see the switch, once again, not fitting in the pickguard, but I do know that I like my paddle switches to be at a slight angle, so I can probably set it at an angle and it's going to be okay. I can also route that part of the control cavity a little bit deeper to use a straight up and down switch if I want to as well, but I do like the right angle switches because I don't have to route as deep. Once again, I'm laying out the knobs. I'm laying out everything in advance. I want to make sure that everything fits in a way that I find aesthetically pleasing and then also usable. I like to have my switch and my volume knob really close to each other so that way I can do volume changes and hit my switch at the same time if I need to. This, again, comes from being primarily a professional musician and a guitar builder and designer second. I design from the idea of what am I going to be doing on stage as my primary consideration. The tone control can go further back. The tone control is the thing I'm least worried about. I use it. Some people don't. I use my tone control, but it can be farther back because it doesn't need to be as many on-the-fly adjustments. And finally, I'm making sure that my knobs are directly aligned with the edges of the pickguard. They don't have to be centered, but they do have to be equidistant from both edges of the pickguard, or it's going to drive me bananas. Finally, with all these lines, I got to color in where I'm going to cut. I drill a hole for my jigsaw blade, and I just start cutting with a jigsaw. I'm going to get my rough cut with the jigsaw, and I just keep clamping the template in place and cutting until I've got it all cut out. And then I'm going to finish it with a variety. That is not a good angle. I'm going to finish it with a variety of sanding blocks and rasps. I did not have a good camera angle, and it was inappropriate. But you can see I finally ended up with a control cavity. And then, similar to my original template, I routed a second one so that you can have two, just in case you mess one up, you have a spare. Why is that important? Ask me how I know. Same thing with the pickguard. I just double stick taped them together, routed a second one. Now I have two. Now I have a spare. It's super easy. The last thing I need to do is I need to design a neck joint for the glue-on neck. I have a bunch of body blanks. If you watched my Visiting the Wood Guy video, I have a bunch of body blanks that are going to need a glue-on neck regardless of how this test goes out. But I cut out a basic piece of wood, and again, I'm just going to route it to match. That's how I start. And you can see that I used the screw holes that are already in the template at the 3rd and the 19th fret, which means everything is always going to match up no matter what I'm doing. Next, I'm going to line up where my neck joint needs to be. And then I didn't film this next part, which I'm totally bummed about, but I'm going to cut to my studio and I'm going to show you. Now, somehow I failed at showing you how I designed this aspect of the template. So basically, all I did, I have my center line here, and I can base my center line off of these screw holes that I've been using that are on my template, right? So, template's here, and I have a screw hole and a screw hole. Those are directly on my center line. So these screw holes, from the routing of it, give me the center line. I take the center line, I draw from where my nut goes, the 12th fret, because I know that's where the neck meets the body for me on this instrument, right? That curve, this curve right here,
and I don't know if in this lighting you can see it, but this curve matches at this fret right here. So, 12th fret. And I can actually see, well, the reason I had to recut the other part doesn't matter. So, I make a line perpendicular to my center line at the 12th fret, and then I measured out 7/8 of an inch on each side, and I drew lines. I wanted, on this one, which I talked about, I've never had a problem. The neck joint is totally solid. I haven't looked at it in forever, but the neck joint is totally solid, but I know that it's just a little nubby neck joint. You know, I based it off of an old Gibson neck joint. So it's only going in maybe to the 15th fret, maybe less. This neck joint is going to go deep into the body. You're not going to see it, but it's going to create a lot more wood-to-wood contact than I'm getting. And I think it's going to be more stable, even though I've never had a problem. Why not stabilize it further, especially if I'm using tempered woods, which rely much more on surface adhesion than on cellular adhesion.
Now, to get that joint nice and tight, I need to have my chisel, because you can't route a right angle. So I'm going to take my chisel and I'm going to sharpen it. And again, I'm assuming that if you're watching this, you may have basic hand tool knowledge, but making sure that your chisels are sharp when you're doing this sort of routing work, when you're doing this sort of template work, is super important. And if you haven't if you haven't used a leather strop, oh my God, this makes all the difference in the world as far as getting that final finish, that final polish, getting this thing to really be razor sharp. And then obviously we want to finish with the thing that my brother gets the most upset about in the world, the paper test. Yes, if you can cut paper like a nice razor blade, then all of a sudden you got a nice sharp chisel. And then I can just use a right angle to get a nice clean line on the edge of each side of my neck template. And now that that's cut and I have a nice clean sharp line, I want to do one last thing. Like I said, you can't really route a nice square edge, so I want to just round over the back of that neck. I'm not even going to have that super tight in the neck joint, but I do want it to be rounded so that when I route, it ends up looking clean inside a joint you'll never see. So I just take it over to the belt sander, round it off, we're good to go, and I can start to set up the final template we have to make, which is the female part of this template, so that we have a joint that can receive our glue on neck. So what I'm doing now is I'm transferring that line from my neck joint to the sides and then to the back of my template. This way it's really easy for me to lay down this original template on top of another piece of offcut that I can then use, and I can line it up to make sure that it's a perfect fit for my neck template. Now, I make a mistake here, and I want to show it to you because I could have done that a better way. And what happens is I can actually see that neck there's a small gap between where I thought that line should be. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bolt the neck down first. I'm going to bolt the neck down, I'm going to trace my joint, and then once the joint is traced, then I'm going to cut the front edge based off of where, stop breaking pencil lead, based off of where that edge is. So you can see I'm taking my ruler now, I'm getting a perpendicular line, I'm making sure it fits perfectly, and now I can cut that out, I can cut the front edge to match exactly, and then I just start tightening up the joint little by little. Once again, if you have a little bit of a cut that doesn't go quite right, you can fill it and glue it. I get that joint pretty tight, and I keep checking it over and over and over and over again, and then just sanding where it's tight, looking for where it's tight, sanding it over and over again. Here you can see it fits in, but it's spreading the template just a little bit. So that's exciting, because now we're so close, and I can just mark where is it super tight, and I just sand just those two areas. And what I end up with is a template now that's going to give me a super solid glue joint. I really want this neck joint to be nice and tight without stressing the wood, without expanding the wood too much, etc. And what I end up with is a lot of nice gluing surface. It's going to fit perfectly, and it's going to work exactly the way I need it to.
So this is where we ended up. This is where we started. Look at the difference. It's a pretty major difference. Is it going to sound different? I don't know. I'm really excited to try it out. But I'm really happy to have this template. You'll notice that on this original one, I drew, you know, P90s. I was going to do 3, and then I did 2, and blah, blah, whatever. Who cares? But I haven't drawn pickups on this because I'm going to use this as a master template. The pickup holes are some of the holes that I use to screw the template down to the body while I'm routing and doing all that stuff. Same thing here with the control cavity. So I want to make sure that this thing kind of stays, no pickups or anything, but I know that this will work for my humbuckers, for P90s, for single coils, for anything. And this is where we end up. I'm excited. I'm excited for the next step. Next step is we start cutting wood. Finally. Thanks for hanging.